shipyard in Gdańsk. And there were groups of people, and Lech Wałęsa got everything he wanted, and he was ready with a piece of paper coming out saying, "We've won, we got it." And there were bus drivers outside and the train drivers outside, and they said, "So you've won your rights, what about our rights?" And he stopped. Will you, and this is why you have this famous solidarity movement, because when he was stopped, he looked at the people, they were outside under the hammer of the boots of the Soviets, and he said, "Yeah, you're right, we got what we wanted, but what about you?" And here is this lady, this is what she said: "Will you stand in solidarity with the rest of us? Because you guys got what you wanted, but what about us?" So when I decided to come here, I'm risking to be arrested at every moment, everywhere I go. The criminal charges on me, left and right. We lost count of the charges I have right now. But I decided to come here because I believe that the eyes of the world are fixed on this place, right here. Yes, this little pitiful piece of land. And the eyes of the world are fixed right here on you guys. You are the heroes of the solidarity movement. Don't you dare breaking the line. The whole world is watching you. I was on 60 radio stations driving here, and Americans are saying this to us: when you're done with your tyrants, please come to America and help us do the revolution. Thousands of people are watching you right now, and they're coming tomorrow. You know that? Do you see what is happening outside? The people are bringing food, chili, soup, everything. There's so many people. I've never seen a movement as big as right now. And you've done that. You did it. Now you're going to pack your stuff, take your toys, and go to
let's go!
Now you're going to cave in just because they threaten you with arrest?
Hell no! Let's go!
Here I am. Do you see me hiding? Do you see me?
Nah, we ain't going. Let's go!
And I said I'm coming. I'm ready to be arrested at any moment. You want to take a piece of me? Take it. I said that to them many times. You see, I'm not afraid of them. They're afraid of us. That's the difference. Do not lose your momentum. You have been waiting 2 years for something like this. Now they're scared, they're afraid. That's why they're bringing all this fear and puffing their muscles, and we're going to be arrested. Don't do it finally. Arrest us all. Can you arrest 4 million Albertans? Can you arrest us all? Can you tow every truck, every vehicle? Then start doing it. Now we have a moment in the history of our beloved country finally to deal with the Trudeau Castros and traitors Kennys. It's about time for Canadians to rise up and start roaring.
Let's go!
I'm talking about peaceful resolution. I'm not talking about guns and swords. You see, this image right here, it was the most powerful thing I could ever do. And it went viral all over the world because it showed simply me on my knees in the middle of the highway being taken by SWAT team. Why? For inciting people to come to church, participating in illegal church gathering, and officiating a church service. Who do those people think they are? Yeah. Who do they think they are? Kenny, who do you think you are? How dare you come to my church? How dare you come to my restaurant? How dare you come to my school? How dare you? It's about time to take what's rightfully ours. You see, we are not asking anymore. We are demanding. This is our province. This is our nation. I did not emigrate here for my children to be enslaved again. By Kennys? By Hinches? By Toms that doesn't even know if he's a man or a woman?
Let's go!
First, fix your mind. Seek some mental health, then maybe you can govern the nation. Where is Trudeau, this coward snake? Where is this viper hiding right now? See here, for the first time in 2 years, you have the power. You got the power. They have the guns, yes. They have the tasers, yes. They got the military, but I'm telling you, it's all useless when the millions will rise up. Tomorrow you have thousands of Albertans coming. And Saturday, thousands more will come. Who can stop masses like this? Who can stop 10, 20, 50,000 people? Who can do such a thing? No one. There is no tyrant big enough that can stop masses. You pack your stuff, you go to Edmonton, and it will be a lot of honking.
Where's Dan?
It will
Let's
be
go.
lots of stir up on the road, and a lot of promises that will never be met. Here is what Polish people did it. This is how they did it. When they understood how powerful they are in that shipyard, when Lech Wałęsa and others understood, now they want to listen to us because we have blocked the entire thing. They started to say, not just those demands, we want them all. Here is what I want to tell you how this could work. Send a message to the government officials with your ultimatum. You see, for the past 2 weeks, they have been giving you ultimatums. They were puffing their chest, coming with their guns and telling you, you all are criminals, terrorists, racists, xenophobes and homophobes and whatever they could take. They were coming here and they were telling you what to do. Now, you tell them what to do. You go to them and you say this. Mr. Kenny, we're giving you 48 hours until Saturday noon to get rid of every restriction in our beloved province because we are free Canadians.
Right.
If you don't do that, you be very careful because you have never seen an angry Albertan yet. And I'm again not talking about violence, I'm not talking about swords and guns and all that stuff. You've got the most powerful wings ever. Who can move 1,000 trucks? Who can move 10,000 truckers?
We can.
With 100,000 supporters. I am calling right now every Albertan not to go to Edmonton, but to come here.
Thank you.
Come here.
Let's go.
I am calling every lover of this country to come here and support you.
Right.
To support here. And to show the villains that you're not going to bow just because Saturday noon. Send a message to the villains and tell them, we have given you ultimatum. Albertans are giving you now ultimatum. If you do not take the restrictions down.
Ezra Levant is my name. I'm the president of Rebel News. I'm ill today. I was actually at home because I was under the weather, but the news today is so enormous, so consequential, and reflects 2.5 years of work by Rebel News, our lawyers, and indeed our viewers, that I came into the office. I may be ill, and if that's the case, I'll ask you to forgive me, and we'll put other things on the screen. But the news today is that Pastor Artur Pawlowski, his brother David Pavlovsky, and another litigant named Chris Scott had a total victory in the Alberta Court of Appeal today. Let's put that court case on the screen. We'll go through it together. Pastor Arthur, for decades, has been known on the streets of Calgary. And when I say the streets of Calgary, because he does have a church and he does have congregants, but where he does most of his work is with the lowest of the low, the lowliest creatures of the city. In particular, he feeds them when no one else will. People who are literally not allowed into the homeless shelters of the city. And for some reason, the city doesn't look at him as a helper or even a saint, but rather as a hindrance, as an embarrassment, as someone who shows that they don't do the work. And so they harass him and ticket him and demand he has permits for giving away food to the homeless. It's really a disgrace. And then one day, and Olivia, tell me if you have this video. One day in April of 2020, just weeks into the pandemic, Arthur was doing what he does best. He was going into the cold. It was actually snowing that day in Calgary. And he gave food to the homeless. And I saw the police bully him, physically push him, shout at him, threaten him, give him a ticket for, I think it was about $1,000, for what they called an illegal gathering. Take a look.
This is not your picnic in a neighborhood for the fun of it. We are providing necessities of life to those that you and your bosses refuse to provide. You got all kinds of events happening right now, and yet the Calgary's finest are not bothering them. This is the hypocrisy of this city. This is the hypocrisy of our wonderful, fearless leaders. Where is the head name she? The mayor of this city.
Can you guys do respectful social distance?
He's allowed to stand back from you a little bit. I need 8 feet.
Whoa.
I need 8 feet. Stand back. Okay?
Or what?
Stand
You're
back.
gonna threaten me and abuse me?
Hey, guys,
Do not do
6
that.
feet.
Tell him not
6
to
feet
touch
away.
me.
6 feet away for
Back up
everybody.
now.
That's for everybody.
The police
I saw that video, and I was angry. And I called Arthur, and I said, we're going to get you a lawyer. We're going to crowdfund this ticket for you. You should not have to pay the ticket. And a project called Fight the Fines was born. And thousands of Rebel News viewers crowdfunded legal defenses for Arthur, and indeed others who were charged with similar infractions. And I'm sorry, I'm a little under the weather. I apologize. And it's been 2.5 years, almost 2.5 years. And in fact, things went from bad to worse for Arthur. He kept his church open during the lockdowns, even though there was never an outbreak at his church. And because most churches submitted and complied, the government focused their energy on those few holdouts, on those few churches that dared to stay open, that dared to minister their flocks. And Arthur was the one they hated the most. As you can see, they had a rivalry with him that predates the lockdowns. And take a look at this. This video went viral when he was telling them to get out. And remember, Arthur's from Poland, a country that was first occupied by the Nazis. It was actually Hitler's first invasion. So they had Nazi domination, and then they had Soviet domination. And Arthur grew up in that country, and he knows about police in churches and fascism. And so he called them out using the moral history he has of resisting Nazism and communism, and he told them to get out of the church. I want you to see this video. You'll remember it, because this video went viral around the world. Take a look.
Please get out. Get out of this property. Immediately get out.
Okay.
Get out of this property immediately. Out. I don't want to hear anything. Out of this property immediately. I don't want to hear a word. Out. Out. Out of this property immediately until you come back with a warrant. Out. 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 Out of this property. Immediately out. Immediately go out and don't come back. I don't want to talk to you. Not a word. Out of this out of this property. Immediately out. I don't care what you have to say. Out. Out. Out of this property, you Nazis. Out. Out. Gestapo is not allowed here. Immediately, Gestapo is not allowed. Out. Do you understand English? Get out of this property. Go. So go. Nazi, out! Out! You understand? Nazis are not welcome here. Out. And don't come back without a warrant. Do not come back without a warrant. You understand that? You're not welcome here. Nazis are not welcome here. Gestapo is not welcome here. Do not come back, you Nazi psychopaths. Unbelievable, sick, evil people. Intimidating people in a church during the Passover. You Gestapo, Nazi, communists, fascists. Don't you dare coming back here. Can you imagine those?
So Arthur told them to come back with a warrant, or actually he phrased it, don't come back without a warrant. Well, the thing is they did. Not a warrant per se, but a court order issued by a judge in Alberta called Judge Rook that basically said anyone who defies a health order is guilty of contempt of court. The thing is, Judge Rook's order didn't mention Artur Pawlowski or his church at all, and didn't specify what the church was doing. So those cops there, and the reason Arthur kicked them out is they were literally coming to his church during a service, interrupting the service. You don't do that. In fact, I should tell you that the Canadian Criminal Code makes it actually a crime to interfere with a religious gathering when it's underway. I don't know if you know that. So Arthur told them, don't come back without a warrant. And indeed they did come back, not with a warrant, but with this order from Judge Rook. And they gave it to him, and he didn't read it. They sort of threw it at him or something. And they said, we've served you with this warrant. And now this court order, and now we're going to treat you like a criminal. And what happened next was shocking. They didn't arrest him at his church where he had supporters. They didn't arrest him at his home. They know where he lives. They didn't contact his lawyer. Like I said, we gave him a lawyer back in April 2020 when he got that ticket from those pushy cops. They knew who his lawyer was. When you go to arrest someone, you can call up their lawyer and say, hey, have the guy turn himself in. Or you can pick him up at his home. They didn't do that. They chose to have a SWAT team style takedown on the streets, on the highway. There was no police sense to it. It would make no operational sense. It was not safe. It was not necessary. But it was vengeance for his comments, Nazis out, Gestapo out. They said, you're calling us a Nazi, are you? You're calling us the Gestapo. We'll show you Nazis and Gestapo. Take a look at this.
Guys, both you and Mr. Pawlowski over there, you guys are both under arrest. Please, if you would, step on the vehicle and comply.
Report, yes.
Open the door, man.
Whoa! Stop!
What's your name, officer?
Do it the Nazi style. Do it the Nazi style. You're good Gestapo. Do it the Nazi style. Do it the Nazi style. Do it the Nazi style. Do it. The taser me. Kill me. Do it the Nazi style.
This is not communist China. Don't you guys have family and kids? Whatever happened to Canada? God keep our land glorious and free. What are they going to do when they come for your kids? Shame on you guys. You call yourselves Canadians? Man, where's your oath? Where's your honor? Where's your dignity? You guys aren't Canadian.
Why would they do that? He's not armed. He's a pastor. He's never been charged with a crime in his life. He was not charged with a crime here. Keeping a church open is not a crime. I've read the criminal code. It's not in there. They could have arrested him in his house. They could have arrested him in his church. They could have called up his lawyer and asked him to turn himself in, but they didn't. It was an El Chapo-style takedown, like a terrorist or a drug kingpin. And even how they did it, why would you take someone out of a car on a road and pull them into the road, a traffic lane into the road, not off of the road? There were still cars whizzing by and turning. They didn't actually shut down the road. Why did they do that? How many cars were involved there? I couldn't quite count. It looked like there were maybe 8 police cars, so probably 15 cops. Why did they do that? That decision wouldn't have been made by an ordinary cop. That would have been made by a higher cop, probably approved by the chief himself. This was vengeance. This was a political vendetta. This was the guy who wouldn't comply getting what was coming to him. This was the guy who dared to speak up when that cop pushed him around back in April in the snowstorm, who dared to say, no, feeding people is not a gathering. It's what the city should be doing. Oh, you're calling us Nazis? We'll show you Nazism. They took him to prison that day. They took him to prison another time and another time. I think he's been to prison 3 times. In solitary confinement, of course, for his safety, because of COVID. They let hundreds of violent prisoners out of prison in the name of COVID, but they put Pastor Artur Pawlowski into prison in the name of COVID. All because of that underlying order by Judge Rook that didn't mention Artur Pawlowski at all, or his church. That was the fig leaf behind which the Calgary police arrested him in such a shock and awe approach. But of course, police are only part of our system of law and order. There's a prosecution, which is generally directed by the provincial attorney general. But again, something was odd here. In the case of Artur Pawlowski, they didn't have a regular prosecutor look at it. A regular prosecutor would never have done these things. There was a special prosecution team made by Jason Kenney that had people from the Justice Department, special prosecutors, people from Alberta Health Services, special health police. It was a multi-million-dollar special anti-church unit. And I say that because we've seen that same unit prosecute all the churches in the province. It's like a vice squad or a drug squad or a gang squad, a specialized group of police and prosecutors whose hunter-killer mission is to go after Christian churches. And that was Jason Kenney and his disgraced justice and health ministers. So they went to court, and the matter went before a judge named Adam Germain. Adam Germain is technically a judge. I'll grant him that. But he's not a very good judge. He's not a very smart judge. He's a lazy judge. He's a bigoted judge. But most importantly, he's a partisan judge. He was appointed to the bench because he was the failed Liberal leadership candidate in the province of Alberta. And when he finally heard the case of Artur Pawlowski, he did the most stunning and shocking thing that, like I say, put truth to Arthur's accusations that there were Nazis and Gestapo afoot. Justice Adam Germain, in a real court in Canada in 2021, said that from now on, if Artur Pawlowski were to criticize public health orders, criticize the government, speak against them in any way, he must immediately pull out a little scrap of paper upon which the judge himself had scribbled his own thoughts on the matter, where Artur Pawlowski had to say what I just told you in a sermon, in a media interview, in a Facebook post, is not correct. The official government line is A, B, C, D. Immediately after saying his most heartfelt views, he was required by law, by a court order, by a ruling by this kangaroo judge, Adam Germain, to read a self-denunciation. Have you ever heard of that before? By the way, in our system of law, we do not even require murderers or rapists to renounce or denounce themselves or to issue false apologies because we know they're meaningless. If you command a man to say sorry when he doesn't mean it, what use is it other than you've proven that you have total power over him? This thuggish judge, Adam Germain, made that order well. Our lawyers went to court and got a stay of that and took it to the Court of Appeal. By now we're 2 years into it. I'm not going to tell you how much money into it, but let me just tell you it's quite a bit. And we finally had our day in court, in a real court, not Adam Germain's kangaroo court. A real court. 3 judges in the Alberta Court of Appeal. And this morning, those 3 judges issued their unanimous ruling. And they found that the order, the Rook order, that warrant of sorts, that court order that the cops used to arrest Artur Pawlowski, they found that that court order was invalid. It was impermissibly vague. It was useless. No one could rely on it. They struck down the order that started all of this. And therefore, all the fruit from that poisoned tree, the shock and awe brutal arrests, the jail after jail after jail, Adam Germain's word ban, the fines, every shred of it was thrown out today by the Alberta Court of Appeal. And that was only possible because of you, because you and thousands of people like you chipped in $50 or $100 or $5 or $1,000 to pay for top-notch legal talent that fought with Arthur every step of the way, and that, by the way, is still engaged in defending Arthur from other abusive prosecutions. Today, the legal system slowly and costly finally vindicated Artur Pawlowski, throwing out his convictions, throwing out the order, and condemning by name that partisan judge, Adam Germain, and throwing out the underlying order. And I'm delighted to have on the line with us now from Calgary the lawyer who deserves so much credit for today's win, a passionate civil libertarian. You know her from her reports on Rebel News as she was interviewed by many of our talent. I'm talking about Sarah Miller with the leading litigation firm JSS Barristers. Sarah, congratulations again. I'm so pleased, and I say this in the most generous and friendly way. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of what you've achieved for our country and indeed beyond our country, because Artur Pawlowski has had the support of people around the world, and that support came down to you and your team, and you were there in the Court of Appeal, and today you had an utter win. So I thank you, Sarah, on behalf of our viewers. Oh, I think you're on mute there, or maybe we.
Thank you for having me,
We've
Ezra.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. Now, I know you're under the weather. I'm under the weather, too. I came in because I thought this was such an important story. Now, listen, I'm more political in my language, and I know you would never say the words that I've just said about the police or indeed about Judge Germain. And that's one of the reasons you're so effective, because you're a disciplined professional lawyer who went into that Court of Appeal, head held high, and you made the case based on the facts and the law, not just on emotion and not on politics. You went in there in the law. Give me a minute on that. This case is about Artur Pawlowski, but it actually sets a precedent that could have gone a very different way. For the government to have such enormous power to order people to make compelled speech, to order them to condemn themselves, to put people at such risk of vague court orders, Artur Pawlowski, his liberty was in the crosshairs, but you actually, I think, fought for every Canadian of every political background. That's my view. Tell me what you thought of it.
That's exactly how I was approaching it as well, Ezra. So the issue that I really saw with the decision that Justice Germain made when he first made the finding of contempt was extremely concerning, and for a number of reasons. The core reason that I thought was the most concerning was it really attacked the division of powers that we have in this country. So we have laws that are made by different actors, right? We have laws that are made by our elected representatives, and they create things like our Public Health Act. And so in Alberta, we have elected officials acting in government, creating this structure of the Public Health Act. And the Brooke Order, as interpreted by Justice Germain, made it so that the Public Health Act and the fines and sanctions made under that were no longer in effect, because now we've got this new order, this new approach of how we're going to police and monitor our citizens. It overreached. It was an improper and inappropriate approach to injunctions, as far as applying it to the Pavlovskys or interpreting it so it should apply to all Albertans everywhere. And it was a concerning precedent. I am so thankful that we were able to go to the Court of Appeal, thanks to the contributions to the Democracy Fund, so that we could make sure that that kind of precedent does not remain the law in Alberta. And thankfully, the Court of Appeal has agreed with us and has struck down the decision by Justice Germain.
All right. Well, you said a lot of interesting things there. I want to break this apart. Do you have about 10 minutes with us, Sarah? Because I want to get into the meat of the ruling. Now, Olivia, I think you've got the ruling there. I'm looking at paragraph 53 of it. Now, Sarah, I'll read it out in case you don't have it in front of you, but I know you know this ruling pretty well. So what we had is a couple of different problems, and frankly, you were victorious in all of them. We have the compelled speech issue, which is just so odious to me. But the reason Arthur got caught in this trap is he was handed a court order from this Judge Rook that didn't have his name on it, didn't describe him or exactly what he did. And so I'm going to read a little bit from the Court of Appeal's unanimous ruling today. I'm going to read paragraph 53, so give me about 1 minute to read the text, and then I'd like to invite you to explain, maybe in plain language for our viewers, why this is so important, why having clear court orders protects all of us against overreaching police and, frankly, overreaching judges. So let me read a bit of paragraph 53. When determining who is subject to an order, that means who's bound by it, the words used in the order must be clear and, like the language of a statutory instrument, are presumed to have been included for a reason. There are two aspects to paragraph 1 of the injunction: identifying the persons to which the injunction applies, identifying the nature of the prohibited conduct. And I'm just going to read a few of the details there. Shall be restrained anywhere in Alberta from organizing an in-person gathering, including requesting, inciting, or inviting others to attend an illegal public gathering, promoting an illegal public gathering via social media or otherwise, attending an illegal public gathering of any nature in a public place. And then I'm just going to read paragraph 54. It is the first aspect of paragraph 1 that's at issue here. The injunction does not state that it applies to all persons with notice of the injunction, nor to all persons with such notice, including the named respondents, which is essentially the interpretation. There's some technical language here. But I don't want to get bogged down in the wording, but you understand the gist of what I'm talking about here. Clarify this. Does this mean that a court can't just name the vast swath of people without particularizing what you have to do wrong to be in breach of the order? Am I right on that?
Yeah, so we're dealing with two steps here, right? The first step is what Alberta Health Services did, which is go into court and ask for an injunction to constrain some sort of behavior. The second step is, okay, well, if you breach that order, can you be held in contempt of it? So in theory, the order as it was obtained can be done. But if you want to find somebody in contempt of the order, that's never going to work for you. The way it was drafted, the way it was written, the way that it was obtained, according to the Court of Appeal, won't work. So an order that is going to constrain an Albertan, their ability to move and do things and gather with people or say certain things on social media, or encourage people to attend a gathering, or even just promote it by retweeting or anything like that, needs to name people specifically. You can't go in and get some vague language about people acting under their instructions or independently to like effect, and think that that is, those words are going to capture any Albertan and prohibit them from doing things. So we see this in environmental protesting, we see this in Indigenous protesting. You need to name the people specifically, or if you're doing, a John Doe, Jane Doe situation, that's still permitted, but you need to be really specific as to who is going to be captured under this order. And that's what the Court of Appeal is saying here.
Yeah, I mean, let me just read one more paragraph, and I'm sorry, I chose one a minute ago that was a little bit technical. I'm going to read paragraph 59, because this is sort of their summary of it. Where there is ambiguity in a phrase that purports to identify a group of individuals to whom an ex parte injunction applies. And by the way, ex parte is Latin. It means without that person there. So Alberta Health ran to court in secret. They didn't tell Arthur. They didn't tell you, even though they knew you were on the file for Arthur. They ran into court secretly and convinced a judge to issue this order. So they have a high burden of being fair if you're sneaking into court and not letting the other side know. So here's what the Court of Appeal said today. Where there is ambiguity in a phrase that purports to identify a group of individuals to whom an ex parte injunction applies, the injunction may not be sufficiently clear to found contempt proceedings against such individuals for breaching the terms of the order. As all elements of contempt must be established beyond a reasonable doubt, and here's the line, we conclude that the injunction here was not sufficiently clear and unambiguous when it referred to other parties, quote, acting independently to like effect, so as to apply to the Pavlovskys. The contempt finding against the Pavlovskys must therefore be set aside. So that's really the nub of it, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And it's really important to hold, especially a government actor, to a really high degree of specificity, because as you said, they went in not only without giving us notice, but they went in on their first day in court, May 5th, 2021, and had the matters proceeding in camera, which means there was no court recording. Usually you go into court, I couldn't convince a judge for the life of me to turn off the recording and let us speak privately without it being recorded. It's a public institution. It's there for the public. I'm going to be recorded when I'm in court. May 5th, 2021, Alberta Health Services goes into the court and proceeds in camera without court recording. We have no idea what was said between them and the judge. They go back on May 6th. Again, still no notice to me, still no notice to the Pavlovskys, no notice to Christopher Scott, who is named in the order, no notice to his counsel, who Alberta Health Services was aware of, and gets this order, which is very vague. And that's why you want to give notice to the other side. The other side sits there and goes, well, this doesn't make sense. Where is this going to go? We look at things when we're looking at somebody else's work product in a more particular way. Alberta Health Services got this order. They didn't turn their minds to, I guess, how it was going to be interpreted, or thought that it would be so vague and broad that they could apply it to anyone. And the Court of Appeal has said, no, you can't do that.
You know, one of our mottos at Rebel News is telling the other side of the story. We believe that there's more than one side of the story, and we should hear from both sides. That's not just a journalistic rule of thumb. That's actually a precept in the law. In Latin, they say, audi alterum partem, hear the other side. Hear the other side. Maybe they know something that would enlighten us. Maybe we're missing a trick, right? Hear the other side. The clash of two passionate parties and a neutral judge in the middle sorting it out. So if you have a secret meeting where the other side is not invited, and I didn't know what you just said, that they literally turned off the recording. I've never heard of that before. Even in cases where there are minor children and there's a court publication ban to protect the identity of the kids, they don't turn off the recording. They just make a rule, hey, journalists, you can't say the names of the kids. I have never in my life heard of a recording being turned off so you could have a little secret justice. That reminds me of the Star Chamber in medieval times. But at least in the Star Chamber, you were there with a lawyer. I didn't even know how bad that was. And that's the thing. I mean, I'm a little under the weather, so I'm not as high energy as I'd like to be, Sarah. But I started the show today with the first thing I saw very early in the pandemic when the cops were pushing around Arthur when he was feeding people in the snow in Calgary. And that's what got under my skin. I thought that's not right. They're picking on this guy. And so we retained you. That was in April or even March of 2020. And so by the time this Rook order, and by the time the Nazis out, and by the time the shock and awe SWAT team arrest happened, you had been working for Arthur for a year, right?
Over a year.
Yeah, so you had interacted with the government by phone, in person, by email, by fax, in court. So they knew you. And for them to pretend they didn't know you, pretend they didn't know you were on the file, and to go to court and have a secret huddle with a judge, and then serve this order on Arthur instead of on you, and then arrest him in the street like he's El Chapo, instead of just saying, hey, Sarah, you know what? Can you bring him in? Can we arrange for a time where you can bring in Pastor Arthur, because we are going to charge him. Can you bring him in? Like, for them to pretend that you were not on the file is, I believe that's unethical. I believe that's sharp practice. I believe that there was so much bad behavior here by the government. And once, okay, you make a mistake. Twice, maybe you're exuberant. But again and again and again and again and again, I really feel like this was a government vendetta against a man they just, so will someone save me from this turbulent priest? I believe that they hated this man so much that they justified it in their mind that they would break any ethical and legal norm to get him. That's how I feel.
Yeah, I think it's very easy once you let your emotions get involved into something to forget what your role is as an, to the court to bring all the evidence forward. When you feel like somebody is so very wrong in what they're doing, it makes it very easy to turn off that filter in your brain to say, I'm not going to be concerned about that, or this is right and vindicated in some way. I don't know that anybody at Alberta Health Services really went out to act inappropriately or to ignore the laws and rules and principles that we usually use to guide ourselves. But I am certain that they were motivated by emotion and by a misplaced sense of righteousness. And they forgot to keep their filter on to say, what is the legal analysis here? What are my duties here to the court? And what are my duties to people in Alberta to make sure that people who I'm not thinking about right now in my anger are going to be captured by and subjected to this order? So we know that there was other pastors arrested that same weekend with Artur and David. And I just wanted to mention one other thing. Is you said they served Artur. They never actually even served him. He was running his church the whole day. He never received service of this order at any point during that whole day. It was served on David, who, of course, didn't understand what he was being served with because he had never heard of this and didn't know what was happening.
Yeah,
and the police couldn't be bothered to explain it to him.
And there's technical language in there. I mean, he's an immigrant. English is not his first language. The law, which is a technical English, is not his first language. He has a top-notch lawyer, but they didn't give it to you because the whole thing was cut any corner necessary. You know what? I quoted that line. Whoops, I'm going to turn my phone off. I quoted that line. It was Henry II who said, will no one save me from this meddlesome priest? And they killed Thomas Becket. They killed the priest. It's not new for politicians just to... And why do they hate the clergy? Because the clergy are obedient to a higher power. Most churches closed their doors because Jason Kenney told them to. Most did. But a few true believers, some in Edmonton, some in Calgary, just refused to. And that's a real power struggle. Well, am I not the king? Am I not the king? Will someone save me from this meddlesome priest? And 4 men said, okay, I better damn well save the king from this meddlesome prince. They went and killed Thomas Becket, the head of the Church of England. I think he was the Archbishop of Canterbury, as they called him. Well, who's the boss here? Am I not king? And Jason Kenney couldn't get this meddlesome priest to bend the knee. So they got him to bend the knee on the street, didn't he? He bent the knee on the street. All right, I'm mad. Sarah, I got a question for you. What other cases are proceeding against Artur Pawlowski and his brother David?
Oh, there's quite a few. So related to this decision that we had from Justice Germain, that's now been struck. But while they were under that probation order, both of them were charged with breaches of probation. We've entered not guilty pleas to those charges. There's all sorts, before this was set aside, there's all sorts of issues with those charges, but both of them were charged with breach of probation. Artur Pawlowski has also been charged with criminal contempt of the Rook Order, which, based on the analysis given by the Alberta Court of Appeal, the Rook Order doesn't apply to the Pawlowskis or Artur specifically, so that also should not be proceeding, but it's still outstanding as of today. There's also a charge against Artur Pawlowski for attending the Coutts border here in Alberta and giving a speech, I guess, or a sermon at the Coutts border during the trucker convoy protest that was down there in February. So he's been charged not only for criminal mischief, over $5,000 for supposedly inciting mischief with the highway, but also under what is legislation in Alberta only, the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act. Now, the unions who, sometimes want to strike, sometimes want to demonstrate, have tried to challenge this act as unconstitutional. They've not been granted standing. They've not been allowed to proceed with their challenge, but it's widely understood that this act is likely unconstitutional. So Artur is the first person that we have been able to figure out has been charged under this act, and so he's charged with mischief and the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act offenses for the February protest.
I got a question for you. All those breaches of probation and all those things that emanated from this, like I say, fruit of the poison tree, it would seem to me that those are all now moot. That's what you suggested.
Yeah, the Coutts protest, not moot, but because it arises
that's a different
from
law. That's the
just its own.
infrastructure law. Yeah.
Yeah, but the probations, they should be moot. So I hope, I expect that the Crown will discontinue those charges for breach of probation against both the Pawlowski brothers and as well the criminal contempt proceedings for Artur Pawlowski should also be discontinued based on this decision. So, but Artur has been subjected to arrest, detention, arrest, detention, and outstanding criminal proceedings for 2 men who are in their 40s with no criminal record to date, facing criminal charges because of this decision from Justice Germain and everything that flowed from that.
I don't want you to talk about anything subject to solicitor-client privilege. I don't want you to give away any strategies. I don't want you to tip your hand. I don't want you to give any notice to the bastards on the other side. But it is my observation that the prosecution, and I would say persecution, of the Pavlovskis was not normal, that it would not have been abided by a normal prosecutor, that there were decisions made at higher levels. You don't have a 8-car, 15-cop takedown of a guy on a highway without that being approved by senior police brass. I'm sorry, it doesn't happen that way. You don't have a hunter-killer team of dedicated police, Alberta Health Service officers and prosecutors going church by church. That's a special vice squad. I believe that there was a higher level of operation here, a political level of operation. Like I said, I've never heard of a recording being turned off in a court before. Never heard of that. Never heard of that. I believe that there was malicious prosecution. I believe there was abuse of office. Now, I know that just because you lose a court case doesn't mean there's malicious prosecution or abuse of office. Courts are allowed to get it wrong, and the way you solve a wrong court is with an appeal to a higher court. So Justice Adam Germain, I think he's a disgrace. I think he should resign. I don't think he should have been put on the bench in the first place. I think he discredited his name for all time. But that's not a criminal. That's not necessarily even unethical. That's to be corrected by the higher court. And indeed, he was slapped down pretty hard today. So I'm not saying just because someone got it wrong that there was malfeasance. We're humans. We're allowed to get it wrong. But there is a 20-year vendetta against Artur Pawlowski. You've been on his file for 2.5 years. I happen to know that he's been fighting with City Hall for at least a decade before that. And they just can't stop hating him. And it infected the last mayor of Calgary, the police chief. It infected Jason Kenney in the cabinet. I do not believe that the persecution and the prosecution of him was normal. It feels like the kind of obsession that governments have with, I'll just pick a name, Julian Assange. Obviously a different species altogether. But it feels so obsessive. It's not normal. Are there any tools that a thoughtful, professional, ethical, fact and argument-oriented lawyer could use? And don't give anything away here if it's private. But I just feel like a court of appeal ruling, it feels good, but good Lord, the guy had to go through 2 months in prison, high 6 figures in legal fees, humiliation on purpose. Is there nothing more for him? Can there be some sort of inquiry? Can there be some sort of comeuppance and investigate? How did this get so wrong?
There's a few things that could be considered going forward. One is, as you indicated, a tort action for malicious prosecution and abuse of position. So that's certainly an option. Those are not easy cases to make out. As far as the wrong decision by Justice Germain, that, as you say, the remedy is go to the Court of Appeal. Getting the law wrong, applying the law wrong, interpreting the law wrong. Courts of appeal overturn decisions all the time, so there's not a lot we can do there. But arguably, the action of either Alberta Health Services or the Crown Prosecutor's Office, depending on how the next few days play out, at least with the Crown Prosecutor, could attract at least a consideration for the tort of malicious prosecution. As I say, it's not an easy case to make out, but certainly in this, from our perspective, this was so clearly something that should have never gone to the first hearing date. Police failed to give proper notice. They arrest, they detain for 3 days, 54 hours or something. So nearly 3 full days, and they release him with no conditions, really, keep the peace, be in good behavior type. And then for Alberta Health Services to pick up the mantle from that mistake and to continue it through bringing multiple witnesses, through combing through his social media for months to give additional little tidbits to Justice Germain to feed on, or bringing irrelevant evidence into court, failing to comply with the rules of court regarding hearsay or regarding, splitting the case or bringing certain evidence at certain times. All of those things are very concerning. It's either an indication of, as I say, forgetting to keep that filter on with respect to not being motivated by emotion. But that emotion feels like malicious emotion. Now, whether a court would agree with us when the test is so very high and there's going to be feelings on both sides as to, well, are you allowed to dislike somebody who is so loud and open and abrasive as Artur Pawlowski? It might not be the easiest case to bring, but it's certainly something available.
Once in a while, people call me irritating and annoying too. It's very rare. I'm always shocked to hear it. But thank God being annoying and irritating and sandpapery is not a crime. And I think that, it's funny. I have some family from the former Soviet Union, and they told me that the people who would get into trouble with the authorities were not normally political dissidents. There were very few of them. It was just people with quirky personalities that were irritating, that bugged people, that maybe were on the spectrum, or that it was a personal slight. The people who were always in trouble with the KGB were quirky people, annoying people. And that was the ultimate way of solving a problem, is rat someone out or snitch on someone to the secret police that they just hated. That it wasn't that they were democracy activists in Siberia or something. It's just someone who rubbed a powerful person the wrong way. Artur Pawlowski has a very strong personality. He's not meek and mild. He uses the lion metaphor, and he tells his people to be lions against the hyenas. That's very different than other church leaders in Alberta being prosecuted, be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. There's doves out there. Arthur says he's a lion. That's not a reason to throw a lion in a cage for 50 days. I want to tell you why I'm sitting here, Sarah. I got a text from a cabinet minister who either looked at my tweets or is watching this program right now. Now, I respect the fact that he texted me directly, and so I'm not gonna quote it because I think it was sent to me in some confidence. It was a rejection of some of my points that this was politically motivated. So I wrote back to this cabinet minister, I'm not going to name them, and I said, will you make a public statement about this case? And will you see that this anti-church squad, was it Karen Thorsrud? Was that the prosecutor?
No,
Nope.
So for this particular one that we just got the Court of Appeal decision from, it was actually in-house counsel at Alberta Health Services who prosecuted this whole proceeding.
Got it.
So not any formal Crown prosecutor on this particular file. Got
it. So I think Thorsrud was on another one. I'm just writing this to the cabinet minister. Is there this squad of police and prosecutors who were assigned to this detail? Am I right when I say there's a kind of vice squad, kind of like a gang squad, a drug squad, a vice squad, that there is a squad that's been going on around Alberta specializing in going after the meddlesome priests? Am I accurate when I say that? This cabinet minister challenges me.
So Calgary Police Service created a unit for the purposes of enforcing and acting against anybody who may have been breaching Public Health Act violations. So the city of Calgary, their police force created that unit. We have that in the cross-examination transcripts on this matter from the Court of Queen's Bench. So numerous police officers who provided statements, they had testified that they were part of that unit, that's what their mandate was. They had a somewhat secretive meeting the morning of May 8th, 2021, a town hall meeting of sorts to send out multiple groups and multiple teams to go and enforce the Rook order, which we now know was completely unlawful. It didn't apply to anybody in Calgary that weekend. It applied to the rodeo organizers and participants up 2 hours away from Calgary. So that whole unit has been mobilized to act against Artur Pawlowski and David Pavlovsky multiple times. They also have the city of Calgary has bylaw enforcement that also they have a unit created essentially to respond to what seems to be responsive to the Walk for Freedom marches. So once those started getting up and going and happening weekly with in the city of Calgary, they set up a bylaw service that also triggers it. So at least in the city of Calgary, I don't know what RCMP is doing. I can't say, in all of Alberta that's happening, but certainly it's happening here in Calgary.
I've got some ideas I'll share with you off camera about what to do. Listen, you've been very generous with your time, and I've learned a lot from you. I would encourage our viewers to read the ruling It's on our website, savearthur.com. We have a number of lawyers who work for Rebel News directly. You're working on this project for the Democracy Fund, which is a registered CRA charity designed to litigate and educate Canadians about civil liberties. And that's very much on point with Pastor Arthur. You've got freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion. There's a lot of really core freedoms at stake. And then, of course, the due process, the fundamentals of just natural justice. So it really is a great case. People who chip in get a CRA tax credit, which makes it easier for people to give. And your fees, which I glance at, are reasonable, and we're grateful to you. But for someone to fight, this is not your full-time job, but I'd say it's probably close to a half-time job for you working on Arthur, and it has been for years, and you have colleagues. You have a senior lawyer there, Robert Hawks, QC. You've worked with Chad Haggerty, former cop who's now a criminal lawyer. You have staff. So you're the star and you're the leader, but you have a larger team. And I am not going to, for reasons of confidentiality, disclose the total amount we have paid amongst all the lawyers. But it is an enormous fee, worth every penny, because this isn't about money. It's about protecting our civil liberties. But if it were not for the donors and this charity, the Democracy Fund, no normal human could have defended themselves for a 2-year battle, 3 prison terms, hundreds of thousands, let me just put it that way, hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees, endless court appearances. I mean, I admire Arthur for his stamina to being arrested, being jailed, and not breaking. They were trying to break him. But no normal person could afford this fight. And even if you were a millionaire, I think most millionaires would say it's not worth it. You know, just pay the penalty, take the loss. I'm not going to spend 2 years of my life and countless hundreds of thousands fighting on a point of principle. I think there's something wrong in the system when it takes a guy 2 years, 2, 3, 4 lawyers, not quite $1 million, to get a little bit of justice, and he's still being hunted.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for this case to have been the size and nature of it that the government has brought against Artur Pawlowski and David Pavlovsky, that they have brought so many witnesses, that they have tried their absolute hardest to make sure that he was in prison. I talked to other lawyers at my firm who, on a normal matter, everything's contentious, but not civil liberties oriented, a contempt proceeding might take a day, might have maybe 10 pages of written submissions. In this case, we had cross-examinations on 5 different witnesses. We had briefs due on the contempt finding and the sanction finding. We started this process on the contempt finding in May. We had a release hearing. We had multiple hearing dates throughout May, all the way through to October, on something that in other cases could have been a day and 10 pages of written submissions. We have over 100 pages of written submissions, charter issues arising, cross-examination of witnesses, to go all the way through to have a judge find wrongfully against the Pavlovskys and have to then launch an appeal to correct that bad precedent finding, and bad precedent not only for the Pavlovskys, but for all Albertans. And arguably, all of our provinces, we rely on one another. So arguably all Canadians, is amazing that your viewers, that the supporters of the Democracy Fund has been able to make sure that this was not just a steamroll by government overreach, and that we were able to put up the fight that we did and eventually get the win that we got.
Yeah, and credit to Arthur, of course. I mean, it's one thing for me to be a pundit who's mad about things. It's one thing for you to be a lawyer who, as a profession, fights things. But he was the one in the prison cell. He was the one arrested on the street. He was the one who didn't know and still doesn't know how long will this go on for. I was at the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom's dinner in Vancouver a few weeks ago honoring Tamara Leach, who's in prison, by the way. And John Carpe, the leader of that group, he's Dutch, and he told me that his grandparents, he told me what it was like in Holland when the Nazis rolled in 1940. And we know now, with the benefit of history and hindsight, that it was, that the World War II ended in 1945. So they had to be able to hold out for 4 or 5 years. But they didn't know that. Was Holland going to be a German province forever? For 100 years? For 1,000 years? Or more to the point, for the rest of their lives? Where do you get the courage to fight against something on principle when you don't know how it's going to end? And Arthur's been in this for years, even decades, and he's not done yet, as you pointed out. So it takes a lot of courage. Like, salute that guy. He's a prickly pear. He's like an egg. You boil it, it gets harder. The more you boil an egg, the harder it gets. I think that's him. I just got a note back from the cabinet minister. I called on him to make a public statement. He said, I can't make a public statement on an ongoing legal matter as a minister of the Crown. And I said, the court said the Rook order, I'm chatting with him while I'm chatting with you, Sarah. The court said the Rook order was invalid and the Germain order was outrageous. I think it would behoove you to make a general public policy statement regarding freedom. You don't need to refer to the case at hand. I'm not asking for any cabinet minister or premier to refer specifically to this case, because this case might be appealed for all we know to the Supreme Court. I doubt it will be. And there's other cases involving Arthur. But surely this case is a splash of cold water to those fevered prosecutors and police. I'm going to stop reading from this cabinet minister before I'm tempted to go further. Sarah, I'm grateful for your time. You've spent an hour with us, and I didn't mean to keep you that long, but I'm glad you were here to bring some sober-minded thought. I'm hot, but you're cool, and that's what won it. Cool, collected, relentless, indefatigable is the word I'm looking for. And I don't want to get too emotional, but I believe that you personally played a very important role, and that your qualities, like there are many lawyers in the world, and a number of them could have done it, but it was your personal qualities that I think really made the difference here, some of the qualities I just listed. And you have my personal gratitude. And the reason that so many Rebel News viewers have donated is in part because they've gotten to know you over the last 2 years in your interviews with our reporters. And so they've learned to trust you and indeed to love you because you share our concerns. Even though I'm quite sure we disagree on many political or ideological points, in fact, I think that strengthens our admiration for you because it goes to your belief in principle. And I know that I'll forever be grateful for the fact that you were there in the court. You never said die. You never said blink. You never said throw in the towel. You never said plea bargain. You fought all the way. And I really think you made a difference. And I hope you get, I know you'll get the affection of our Rebel News viewers, but I hope you get it from other fancier people too. I hope you get it from other members of the bar, and I hope you get it from across the ideological spectrum. I hope people on the left who find Artur Pawlowski a pain in the ass, I hope they see how your work in court has strengthened freedom for all of us. And you mentioned some of the other people who've been arrested before in vague and general court orders. They will never know the work that you did, but they will benefit from it. So thanks very much on behalf of all of us here. We love what you've done for us, and we're so glad you're on the team for freedom.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ezra, and thank you to all your viewers who have been contributing and helping Artur's fight and David's fight. It's been a wild ride, and I'm really thrilled that we got the decision we did today.
Well, thank you for that. All right, we'll say goodbye to you, and we appreciate you joining us. I understand you're in lockdown. You got the Rona. May you get back to good health. It looks like you're doing okay, but I hope you're 100% soon. I'm a little under the weather too today. The both of us are quite a case, but you did a great job today. Thanks for explaining things.
Thanks, Ezra.
All right, there you have it. Sarah Miller, isn't she great? I'm just so I feel so grateful to her, and her fees are what you would expect from a bright young lawyer working on this case for years. I don't begrudge her a penny. In fact, that's the opposite. I believe in this case so much. And so if you want to help us, please go to savearthur.com, because as you heard, there's more battles to come. Now, I have been talking far too much. I would like to bring in other people if we can. I would like to bring in Sheila Gunn Reid if she's on standby. Okay, and we're calling Adam. And I'm trying to do all this while also having a little chit chat with what do you know, a cabinet minister whose name I will not disclose, because I want to keep the conversation going with him. There are some super chats coming, but give me 1 second and I'll get right to those. All right. I'm going to go to Slack and read some super chats. I beg your pardon that I'm not quite as sharp as I normally would be. I am under the weather today, but I came in because this is very important. And they're direct messages to me, are they? Here we go. Twinks says $2. Thanks for the coverage, Ezra. You're welcome. Zinc and Ivy, $5 says Rebel News and Rumble. Yeah, I like the platform. It's a safer platform than YouTube. They don't cancel you as much. Twinks again, we need more legal advisors and lawyers like Sarah who have integrity and honor. She gives me some small hope for the often corrupt Canadian justice system. I feel the same way. I feel hopeful again. Zinc and Ivy, another buck. Rebel 80%, Rumble 20% on a dollar bag. I'm not sure what you mean by bag, but thank you for that. I am going to blow my nose for a second, so maybe just kill the mic just for 1 second. And joining us now from Calgary, I'm pleased to say, is our reporter who has covered this beat very carefully, very closely. He's based in Calgary. He's gotten to know the Pavlovsky family and indeed other Christian clergy who have been jailed. I'm talking about our friend Adam Sos, who joins me now. Adam, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me okay?
I sure can. I love that Rebel shirt. So I've just spent some time kibitzing with Sarah Miller, and I was hot and she was cool. So I was just saying all sorts of mad things. I'm very mad about the treatment of Artur Pawlowski, and I'm glad she's there. It's like the old McDLT sandwich by McDonald's. Keep the hot side hot and the cool side cool. Sarah's the cool side. She took us through the legal analysis and explained things. It's still sinking in on me, because what I take away from this, Adam, is that everything the Pavlovskys went through over the past 2 years was BS. It was all built on a faulty foundation, a foundation of sand. That all the imprisonments, baseless. All the shock and awe highway arrests, without basis. That it started from a flawed, vague, and anonymous, secret court order that the Court of Appeal unanimously said was invalid. But based on that invalid order, the police and the government have had 2 years of abuse of Arthur and his brother David. That's how I take today's news. How about you?
Yeah, 100%. This is 100% a repudiation of what has been clearly targeted political attacks. And I think whether you're hot or cold or calm or bothered on this issue, that is what this boils down to. Anyone watching this objectively throughout the course of the past 2 years, anyone who didn't approach it with malice, could clearly see that something was not right. And as of late, we've been saying there is hope that the courts will eventually get this right, because if they don't, this country is in an incredible amount of trouble, and the political corruption extending down from Justin Trudeau has indeed permeated the courts. But some of the rulings that we've seen, I was just with Chad Williamson, I'm going to be speaking with Sarah Miller after this, some of the rulings that we've seen right across the board, once it gets to this appeals process, once you start to have these constitutional conversations, is just the same reaction you and I would have. I believe the ruling referred to this as a violation against like the natural order of law or something. I mean, it was just so egregious what these people have been doing, from the police to Justice Adam Germain, and to see that categorically overturned and an absolute victory on the front of Pastor Artur Pawlowski, it validates what we've been saying. It validates Pastor Artur Pawlowski's stand. As you said, very many people can think of the man as brash, But the fact is, and this goes to prove it, is that he was right all along, and that righteous fury that is so characteristic of the Polish lion, well, it's certainly been validated today with this massive ruling.
Yeah, and there was. I mean, we've been talking about Arthur because he is the charismatic leader. His brother David is sort of his right-hand man. He was in the ruling as well. Mm-hmm. There was someone else, and again, the Democracy Fund and Rebel News was helping him, Chris Scott. He's the businessman, an entrepreneur who runs the Whistle Stop Diner in the little town of Mirror, Alberta.
Sorry.
He had a partial victory in the court ruling today. Mm-hmm. His fine was cut in half, if I recall. And there's some technical reasons why he had a slightly different outcome than Arthur. But what's interesting to me, and I don't know if you were watching my kibbutz with Sarah, I've been going back and forth with a cabinet minister, with a Kenny cabinet minister, and I'm not going to say his name. Like really, right now, I've written back and forth with him 20 times as we're chatting here. He's writing to me right now, and I believe that this prosecution was inherently political, and this rebuke of it requires a political response. And I believe that the Kenny government or the government, Kenny himself, the justice minister, the health minister, needs to say something in reaction to this. Yes. And it needs to be I don't know if conciliatory. It needs to, we saw Justin Trudeau speak about Tamara Leach and the truckers and Pat King. He didn't necessarily use their names, but he was harder core. He was more belligerent. He was for more punitive approach. He denormalized and denounced. It would behoove an Alberta cabinet minister to do the opposite, to prove that they're not just like Justin Trudeau. I believe the template of the Pavlovskis was actually followed by Justin Trudeau in regards to the truckers. The high-handed, partisan violations of civil liberties. If it was okay in Alberta, surely it'll be okay for the feds. If Jason Kenney himself can do it, well then why can't Justin Trudeau? We broke the taboo in Alberta, and it became the norm nationally. That's what I think happened. And I think Alberta needs to come to terms with that. Adam, I also believe that the case of the Pavlovskis is one of the real reasons why Jason Kenney was dethroned as Premier of Alberta. In his leadership vote, he got like 51% or 53% approval, which means he had to go. But I am quite certain that probably 10 or 20% of the party had turned against him because they couldn't believe what he was doing to the Pavlovskis and churches around the province and businesses around the province. And had he been a true conservative, freedom-oriented person, and frankly, a defender of Christian rights as he used to be, I think he would still be Premier right now.
Oh, I 100% think I would put that percentage quite a bit higher, being on the ground here in Alberta. And I'm not just talking about the sort of selective reinforcement of things we want to hear. You attend a debate, or a protest rather. Obviously, the folks there are going to be saying, yeah, the reason he's gone is this. But even at the UCP AGM, when we spoke to people, most people said, I'm very happy with Jason Kenney, but he's on economics or on these other things, on promoting Alberta business, but he's missed the ball on freedom. That's the sentiment we heard from UCP supporters, Kenney supporters, right across to protesters strongly opposed to him. But I do want to jump back to what you said there about this concept of, well, I don't want to interfere in the judicial process. That's something that's been said to me by Travis Taves, Tyler Shandro, Jason Kenney, right across the board. Well, listen, the entire sentiment of, well, you're just going to defer to the judicial system. The reason people don't go around harassing, arresting pastors, putting them in jail for 51 days. That is not the norm. Whether there was politicians directly and actively instructing the persecution of Christians, or whether politicians gave entirely the impression through orders and rhetoric and dangerous speeches that they made that it was okay to go around rounding up these pastors, that both involves politicians creating this atmosphere where people felt empowered to target, violate constitutional rights, and do all of these things. Furthermore, I'd say their lack of response on this. They could now come out saying, well, now that the judicial process is complete, we have this ruling from the Court of Appeals. If they were in any way objective on this, or if they had any compassion towards what the Pavlovskys and Chris Scott have gone through, they could very easily come out to say, clearly there was some overstep, and it's great to see that the judicial system got this right, or we applaud the decision of the Court of Appeals in upholding people's rights, Albertans' rights. They aren't saying any of those things. They're refusing to comment, and that's because they're not happy. The AHS certainly views this as a loss, and these government officials view it as a loss too. Now, they would love people to forget, they'd love people to move on, but they're certainly not going to do the right thing, and that's saying, well, at least the court's got it right after all of our mistakes. That is so revealing of where they are on this issue.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you've covered the story. You've covered this. Sheila Gunn-Reid has covered it. Our former reporter in Calgary, Cian Bexty, we call him K1. Sydney Fazard has covered this. I think K2, Cian Simoni, has covered this. I can't recall. I've even covered it. I even went out to Calgary once to cover this. Maybe I'm missing other people on the team. We have had truly team coverage of this. We've covered when Arthur went down to the truckers, the border crossing. So we have covered Artur Pawlowski more than all other media outlets combined.
By far.
And and we've also done the important thing of crowdfunding his legal defense. And I think there's a problem in both of those parts, Adam. One problem is, where was the normal civil liberties people? I should acknowledge that the Canadian Civil Liberties Association did intervene in Arthur's case, finally, in the Court of Appeal when it was almost all over. And I'm glad they did. I'm not going to downplay that. But they weren't there carrying the ball the first 99% of the way. They were silent. That's on the civil liberties side. On the journalism side, reporters either ignored the story or mocked Arthur as a kook, an extremist, a conspiracy theorist. I think he was even called a racist or something, which is absurd. So you have a problem. You didn't have the civil liberties groups, and you didn't have journalists. And if it weren't for Rebel News journalists and Rebel News crowdfunding the lawyers, he would have been crushed under the wheels of injustice. It's terrifying, actually.
Yeah, it's absolutely devastating. And I mean, I am so fortunate to be part of this with Rebel News. Extremely grateful to you, Ezra, as well as to the efforts of the Democracy Fund, because I don't think they planned for this. I don't think they accounted for this. I don't think they thought, as this big Goliath of government, that was going to do this maybe test run of overstepping, of taking control of people's lives, of violating constitutional rights. I don't think that they counted on these guys having a David in their corner to take on that Goliath, and that's precisely what we have been. Most of these people would have caved probably and I mean, Pastor Artur has admitted this himself. He could not afford to fight all of these fights, this ongoing prosecution and persecution. So on two fronts, if we weren't able to help him pay for those legal fees in court and take that stand, he wouldn't have been able to stand on his judicial feet to fight back. And if we weren't sharing his story and getting the story out there as to what was happening with this pastor, stories that were translated and his picture appeared in Times Square, these reports were translated into Portuguese in Brazil, they appeared in Poland. I had people from all over the world reaching out about the story of Pastor Artur Pawlowski. If we weren't there sharing his story and the Democracy Fund was not there fighting for him, and particularly our viewers who donated to the Democracy Fund through saveartur.com, this would not be the story. He would not have made it to the Court of Appeals, and he might be sitting in a jail cell suffering for daring to take a stand. But because we were here, because we got to play the role of David in this David versus Goliath battle, Pastor Artur Pawlowski has this great victory. And I think that this is going to very much set precedent and set the bar moving forward, because this is a categorical defeat for this institutional persecution and prosecution.
Well, listen, it's great to catch up with you. I want to thank you for your reportage on the subject, and I really like it when you would go over to Sarah's house, because I know you guys don't live too far away, so you would rush over there to get her to give you the straight goods after the various court hearings. There were so many of those. Well, yeah. Adam, great to see you again. Thank you. I feel good about this, but I can't help, maybe it's the pessimistic side of me. Even on this victory day, I can't help but think, why did we have to go through it? That was political persecution. Yep. And I don't know if you heard, but I've been bantering back and forth while I'm sitting here. I'm going back and forth with a conservative cabinet minister in text messages. I won't say who it is. And he's sort of pushing back at me and denying that there was political machinations behind it. I do not believe that. And if this contradicts the executive will of the government of Alberta, then they should say so. And
yep.
I do not believe that politicians should personally direct police and prosecutorial actions. Of course not. But anyone who thinks that the policing and prosecution of Artur Pawlowski is normal is either naive or a liar. It's not normal to arrest a man in a SWAT team takedown with 15 cops on a rainy highway. It's not normal to throw a man in prison for months. It's not normal to issue a ruling saying you can't criticize the government, and if you do, you have to self-denounce with this little thing I've scribbled down. It's not normal to have secret court meetings. Not just secret, I learned today from Sarah that they actually unplugged the recording devices in the court so it was never spoken to. What the hell is that about? I've never heard of that in my life. So don't tell me this isn't political. It's highly political.
Highly. And I mean, politicians take credit for everything they can, even if they're not remotely involved. That's just what politicians do. The fact that they've time and time again clearly had this stated message of, well, we have nothing to do with that, it implies they know that it is something wrong. That's what they're stating when they're like, we had nothing to do with that. That's just the judicial process. And the fact that they, like I said, aren't replying or coming back to that now and stating it is they're clearly trying to wash their hands of it. But this story is far from over, and if anyone else out there thinks this is done, it's certainly not. There's going to be sort of metrics of accountability, ongoing reports, freedom of information access reports as well. We are going to get to the bottom of this, so there's no sailing off into the sunset scot-free. This legacy of reporting is just getting going, and Rebel News will get to the bottom of all of this.
Yeah. All right, well, great to have you. Thanks very much, Adam. We'll let you get back
Thanks
to
very
things
much.
there. All right, that's Adam Sos from our Calgary office. Well, Olivia, do we have any other folks on deck? Is our friend Sheila available, or is she busy doing other Rebel stuff today? We're going to call Sheila and get her on the phone. You know, I started off slow today. I was a little under the weather, and I was, frankly, in the first few minutes of today's broadcast, I didn't know if I would make it. I apologize for my low energy. I thought we had a good chat with Sarah Miller. I learned a few things from her that I had not heard before. I thought her answers were interesting about possible things we could do about malicious prosecution, although she made it clear that was an uphill battle. Let me introduce my friend Sheila, and I'm going to take the opportunity to blow my nose for a second. So cut my mic and give Sheila the air. Sheila, how you doing? Thanks for taking the time.
I'm great. Actually, the set behind me is your set from the Ezra Levant show because you're sick and you're not supposed to be working today. That's why I'm filling in for you, but duty calls today.
Well, thanks for doing that, and I'm sorry. I mean, it's more sort of hunky and wheezy, but
it's gross. Yeah.
I apologize. Anyhow, I'm sorry. But when I saw the news today, I thought I've just absolutely got to come in. I got so many things to say about it. And I'll talk to you afterwards about this cabinet minister who's been texting me.
Mm-hmm. I'm dying to know.
Hour, which is quite a surprise. I certainly rambled enough. I think people have heard enough from me for the day. Sheila, what are your thoughts on this court's ruling? I take it you've had a chance to read it or at least skim it by now. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I did. I read it just as it came in. And for me, I see not just this as a victory for Pastor Art, something that should never have happened to him. I mean, they've ordered that all his fines be repaid to him, the costs that he paid to satisfy the state in their prosecution of him, those will be returned. But they can't get the time back. How do you return a man's time when you snatched him into jail now illegally? They can never give that back to him. But not only is this a victory for Artur, this is a victory that will have a knock-on effect for dozens of other cases that are still before the court, and it will aid in the appeal of other pastors. For example, the judgment of Adam Germain as it stood was used as a sentencing guideline for Church in the Vine. Church in the Vine in Edmonton's got $80,000 in fines. The prosecutor, Karen Thorsrud, who was part of a hunter-killer task force in Edmonton that went after the likes of James Coates and other church scofflaws during the time of COVID. She initially wanted $1 million+ in fines against that church, but she cited this judgment that is now defunct against Pastor Art when she was making arguments about why Church in the Vine had to be financially ruined for not allowing inspections during church services. So it is my hope that not only has this judgment set Art and his brother free, but it's going to help so many other people who are still before the courts.
You know, I'm looking at the ruling, and the ruling didn't really rely on the Charter of Rights to throw out Adam Germain's outrageous limitations on the Pavlovskys and Chris Scott. Just to say again, this judge, he wasn't asked to do this. He did this himself. He didn't consult with anyone. He's not an expert. He's an old kook. He hand wrote his deep thoughts with Jack Handy on the pandemic, and he said, I wrote this really cool thing, dear diary. I wrote this really cool thing, and you have to say it now whenever you talk about the pandemic. I wrote it myself. I'm serious. Yeah, me. I did that by myself. I'm really good at it. And so he hand wrote this thing. This crazy kooky old man judge. I mean, please retire, you disgraced old fool. And he actually ordered, using the power of the law, that the two Pavlovskys and Chris Scott, whenever they talked about the government, had to immediately take out, this fool judge's thing.
Their Pfizer sales pitch is what it was.
That's exactly right. The Pfizer sales pitch that this Dummkopf, this idiot. I'm calling him an idiot because it's the stupidest. It was so stupid that even in the Court of Appeal, the government prosecutors said, "Yeah, we're not even gonna try and defend that." And when the prosecutors are saying, "Yikes, I'm not even gonna to try and justify that," the judge was just a kook. I'm trying to find the paragraph here. My point is that the Court of Appeal did not say that was against the charter. They said we don't even need to go that far because the entire thing was built on a foundation of sand, because the original court order was baseless, which is too bad. I would have liked to have seen them just scorch that judge, but they were pretty rough with him. I'm just trying to find the exact paragraph that applies. There were a lot of weird things. I just learned from Sarah Miller that there was actually a secret hearing, not just ex parte, which means the other side's not invited. They unplugged the recording device so no one can ever know what was said. I've never heard of that done before, ever. Not even in espionage or terrorism or national security courts do they delete all records of it. That's not done.
If you're looking for that Dear Diary musing by Judge Adam Germain, it's actually in the story that we wrote up earlier today about the appeals court decision. So this is what they're supposed to say. I'm also aware that the views I am expressing to you on this occasion may not be views held by the majority of medical experts in Alberta. While I may disagree with them, I am obliged to inform you that the majority of medical experts favor social distancing, mask wearing, and avoiding large crowds to reduce the spread of COVID-19. Most medical experts also support participation in a vaccination program, unless for a valid religious or medical reason you cannot be vaccinated. Vaccinations have been shown to statistically to save lives and to reduce the severity of COVID-19 symptoms. Well, the lie detector test determined that was untrue, as it would turn out. But none of that is to say that Adam Germain knows anything that he's talking about anyway. He forced these men to supplant their opinion with the government.
Yeah. Hey, Olivia, can you call up paragraphs 31 to 33 of today's Court of Appeal ruling? So that you just heard from Sheila, the little Dear Diary thing that this kooky old judge. You know, it's obviously a tautology that half of people are above average and half of people are below average. In any field, you could say half of doctors are below average. Yeah, well, half of anything is below average if you get right in the middle. So half of judges are better than the other half. I mean, I'm not even saying anything that's just like saying half is half. But you would think that the smarter lawyers become judges, and often that's true. And I think by the time you're on the Court of Appeal, you really are dealing with smart people. And they can be ideologically wrong, but I don't think there are any dummies on any courts of appeal in Canada. I could say there's leftists, there's activists, but you're not dumb. You're not dumb if you're on the Court of Appeal, because it really is an important position. And back to Adam Germain. He's a dumb judge. And I say that because he wasn't appointed for his great success in lawyering. Like, there are some amazing lawyers you say, boy, I wish that guy were a judge. He's so good. And often the best lawyers say, I don't want to be a judge. It's boring. I make more money. I don't want to do that. Adam Germain was one of those loser lawyers that got appointed as a judge as a favor to him, because he ran for the leadership of the provincial Liberals in Alberta, which is like a sacrificial lamb. And so he was thrown a bone, as if sitting on the court is some trinket, like some pension to give someone. So when I say he's dumb, that's not a personal insult. That's an observation. That there's no way in hell someone that dumb could have been put on the court on merit. He was there as a thank you. I think it was by Jean Chrétien. Jean Chrétien put that idiot in our court. And so he just made up crap. Let me read what the three smart judges on the Court of Appeal have to say about him. So, Olivia, I'm on paragraph 31. The qualified speech provisions, that's the mobility and qualified speech provisions. So remember, they banned the brothers from traveling outside Alberta, and they forced them to renounce themselves. They called that mobility and qualified speech provisions, were not requested by Alberta Health Services, nor were the parties invited to make any submissions before the Chambers judge imposed them. Shortly before the hearing of this appeal on June 3rd, Alberta Health Services advised in writing that it would consent to an appeal order varying the sanctions to remove these provisions. Alberta Health Services acknowledged at the oral hearing of the appeal that the provisions offend the Charter of Rights. We are satisfied that the mobility and qualified speech provisions should be set aside. A judge sanctioning for civil contempt, like a sentencing judge, should alert counsel before imposing a sanction that exceeds or is significantly different from that sought by the other party, and afford counsel the opportunity to address the proposed sanction. The failure to provide an opportunity to address proposed sanctions that were not raised by the parties offends rules of natural justice and the audi alternum partem principle. That means listen to the other side. So this is the Court of Appeal saying this judge, Adam Germain, the dumb liberal, dumped in the court like it was some old folks' home by Jean Chrétien. What he was doing was a violation of the Charter. He cooked it up on his own. Even Alberta Health prosecutors, who were despicable people, frankly, even they said, yikes. Whew, you're on your own with that one, Judge Liberal. And then the third paragraph, I'll read it, paragraph 33. We share the concerns raised by the parties and intervener regarding the constitutionality of the impugned positions. Courts have held that Section 2B of the Charter includes freedom from being compelled to express a particular message. And then they cite a case. In this case, the restrictions imposed on Mr. Scott by the impugned provisions were unrelated to his contemptuous conduct and, in the circumstances, unreasonably infringe his freedom of expression and mobility rights. So I guess they sort of do weigh in on the Charter of it. So I was glad to see that there. Well, Sheila, you have covered Pastor Arthur and other churches, and I should tell you, while I've been sitting here, I've been texting back and forth with this cabinet minister. It's very strange because I mean, he's telling me, he's making his case, and I said, what you're telling me doesn't square with what's happening in the government. This is still going on. And then I sent him a copy of your coverage of Church in the Vine. So here I've got a conservative cabinet minister who's texting me 20 times while I'm on this show, Sheila. I'm for freedom. I'm one of the good guys. I've always stood up for freedom, Ezra. Okay.
When?
You're telling me this in a private text. I said, this doesn't square with what's happening with the government. He says, I've always stood for freedom, Ezra. I write back, then please say so publicly, not just to me in a text.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. Everybody knows where you and I stand on this issue.
Yeah.
We say it every day. And whoever this cabinet minister is, he better hope to God I don't go back through his Twitter account and find him musing about Cardinal Zen when he was arrested by the Chinese state back in May. And by the way, Cardinal Zen, he was treated much more gently by the communists in China, because the reason I was paying close attention to the Cardinal Zen case, a couple different reasons. I'm Catholic, he's Catholic. He's been outspoken against the seizure of Hong Kong by the Chinese. And we have repeatedly said time and time again that Alberta has arrested more pastors than China. So I watched the situation with the church in China just to test my theory. And by May of this year, Cardinal Zen was arrested. But guess what? Unlike pastors in Alberta, Cardinal Zen got bail that same day. And he was arrested for his anti-government activism, much like Pastor Art. But Cardinal Zen was out in just a few hours. He's 90, so I appreciate that. But we've got federal conservatives making speeches in the House of Commons. Garnet Jennis, no surprise, he goes to my church. I'd expect him to speak out about a locked up cardinal or retired archbishop. But where was the same outrage for people in his own province, for pastors in his own province? They had none, because we don't want to meddle in the court system. Well, when the court system is unfair and unjust, it behooves our politicians to be principled and speak up.
Yeah. I'm using the word behoove a lot today myself. I've
Oh, good, good. I used it in your monologue.
Thanks for covering for me. You're probably wondering why I'm not doing it. I just didn't want to honk and wheeze over everyone today, but obviously you can see I'm doing that. Well, Sheila, we spent almost an hour with Sarah Miller going through things, and we had a good catch up with Adam Sos, who's been on this file, and you've done great stuff on this. The battle's not done.
Not even close.
As I mentioned, I just texted this cabinet minister the case of the Church in the Vine. What's that, $80,000 in fines? So this hunter-killer squad's still going out there trying to crush churches.
Yeah, they've got $80,000 in fines. The Crown initially wanted over $1 million. Then they thought we'd be more reasonable and have 120,000. They knocked it down to 80 because even the judge said that it was unreasonable. But this church, they are not accused of violating public health regulations. This church is simply accused of not letting their church services be interrupted by the Alberta Health Services Hunter-Killer Task Force of police, bylaw officers, health inspectors, and Karen Thorsrud, the Crown prosecutor, who is so ashamed, I think, of her own behavior in all of this that she insists that she remain anonymous in court. So this stuff is still going on with poor Church in the Vine. They need to come up with this fine now of $80,000 by the end of August, or they face civil enforcement, as in they could take the pastor's house, their car, maybe the church sound equipment. On the flip side, we do have lawyers working very hard to try to get their fines stayed and an appeal heard. And I'm optimistic that an appeal will be heard based on what we heard today, because the judgment against Pastor Art, this specific one, was cited when ruling against Church in the Vine. So I think they have grounds now.
Yeah. Well, Sheila, congratulations to you. You have helped fight this battle. We met with the legal star today, Sarah Miller, but at the end, and of course, Artur Pawlowski is the key man.
Yes.
Who was in the gap. He was the essential man. But it is also true that you and I could, and Adam Sos could not have done our journalism, and Sarah could not have been hired for her legal work. And Arthur's story would not have been told as widely, and nor would he have had legal counsel that was necessary. were it not for the support of literally thousands of Rebel News viewers. It's just how it is. There was a small costs order in today's court ruling. What I mean by that is, because Sarah had such a total victory over the thugs at Alberta Health Services, and they had demanded that Arthur pay, I don't know, $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000. That money will be returned to Arthur, and Alberta Health Services will pay a portion of Sarah's costs. Now, I talked to her on the phone earlier today about what that amount will be. It has to be calculated. There's a certain tariff, and then you multiply it by a certain amount. I think it's going to wind up being about $15,000 or $20,000. Now, I have to tell you, I mean, I shouldn't laugh because it's so sad. Fighting in the Court of Queen's Bench, going to the immediate appeal for a stay, and then going to the full hearing. My friends, I have to give you the bad news. In Canada in 2022, that costs more than $25,000. You may not know. You may not know that that's more like $100,000, and you may also not know that we haven't even received the bill for it yet. But so I'm laughing because, woo, cost order. Yeah, okay, it's better to get a cost order than not, but that will be a fraction, a tiny fraction.
Yeah.
So we do still need help, and you heard that there are still many outstanding cases against Arthur, including the semi-terrorist provision of the Infrastructure Act. So I don't know. I might write back to this cabinet minister and say, I'll believe you when you drop the infrastructure charge against Arthur. Well, listen, I'm glad we had this emergency broadcast. I apologize to the viewers for being a little low energy and a little bit nose blowy, but I wanted to come in and talk about it. Sheila, thanks for holding the fort out west and also for doing my show today. And any last words from you before I say goodbye?
You know, like you said, you know, the true hero of this story is Art. What normal man would have just white knuckled this right to the very end? Art. That's it. And Sarah, just incredibly smart and so thoughtful. And as you pointed out in your interview with her, probably disagrees with us on a bunch of stuff, but she cares deeply about freedom and people getting fair treatment under the law. And that's exactly what you want in a lawyer. But all the thanks truly goes to our viewers at home who, unlike this cabinet minister, are not scared to put their money where their mouth is and stand up for freedom. So none of this would have been possible without them. We would just be fighting a losing fight. So, I mean, I'm sure I say it on behalf of Rebel News. Thank you for allowing us to do this important work on behalf of the churches.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to give anything away, but you're going on a very special mission with Sarah Miller coming up soon. And
a girls' trip.
Yeah, it's going to be a very special trip. You're going to a very unique place to try and get a different kind of justice. I don't know if you'll succeed. It's a long shot, but it's worth
try.
Yeah, and I'll let you tell people about that when you're ready to announce it. That'll probably be in the next week or so. Sheila, thanks for everything. Thanks to our viewers. If you haven't been to savearthur.com, and if you feel like chipping in a few bucks, please do. Until next time, on behalf of all of us here at Rebel World Headquarters and around the country and around the world, goodbye, and keep fighting for freedom.